we'll have to do some preliminary evaluations. But I think Catherine will do well here.
Over here! I'm ready to go in, Coach. Just give me a chance. I know there's a lot riding on it, but it's all psychological. Just got to stay in a positive frame of mind. Let's see that in an instant replay.
Oh my God, she's perfect.
Mr. Chairman, it has a great ring to it. Man, just rings like a bell.
Thanks so much, Benny. Great to be with you. You've been with me for a long time along the ride. I knew you back when I was merely a commissioner, and here I am now in the corner office at the FCC, the chairman's suite, and we have wasted no time getting going. Actually, longer story for another day, but you and I were together actually down at Mar-a-Lago when I had the conversation with President Trump, and he indicated that I'd be chairman of the FCC, and that was a really, really good night. And we've hit the ground running. And look, President Trump has been knocking the ball out of the park. I can't believe it's been 1 week, just 1 week, almost to the minute that he was sworn in, and he came in and knocked out hundreds of executive actions. I mean, you've seen DC forever, right? Most people come in and they hope to turn the ship of government 1 degree here, maybe 2 degrees there. And President Trump has just shattered that mindset. He's turned the ship of government around already. And we are headed towards a great strengthening and golden age for the country. And it feels really, really good to be in DC with President Trump just down the street.
Man, it has got to be just an absolute whirlwind and possibly the most historic single week of an administration in American history. From your position here, obviously you've been making quite a few changes, and something that we've been covering extensively on the program, but you were one of the first out of the gate saying, yeah, DEI will not be operational inside of the FCC. Can you explain that process to us, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, we were ready to go day one. I had been planning for weeks at this point that the very first thing we were going to do was to be coming out of the box, ending the FCC's promotion of DEI. And President Trump beat me to the punch, as he's wont to do. And he got an executive order out on DEI first. And so we were able to come in behind that and the policies he articulated. The American people would be absolutely shocked if they knew how deep DEI and this sort of invidious form of discrimination had crept into the FCC and the alphabet soup of agencies all across government. We put out a release following President Trump's leadership on this, where we eliminated DEI. Look, DEI was listed as the #2 strategic priority at the FCC. Our job is to make sure people have connectivity, to make sure rural broadband is getting out there. And instead of doing that, we were listing the promotion of DEI. We had a DEI advisory group that's now been shut down, and all its members have been informed and thanked for their public service. We had DEI in our budget. We were spending millions and millions of taxpayer dollars promoting DEI, and thanks to President Trump, that is ending.
Yes, and thanks to President Trump, censorship is ending, and I know that this is something that is so near and dear to your heart. Mr. Chairman, for years you've been talking about it. Even before it happened, you said that the infrastructure is in place to censor Americans and to rob us of our freedom of speech. Few listened to you years ago when you said that, and boy, have you been proven correct. Donald Trump ending some of the censorious aspects of the federal government. Can you talk us through the work that you're doing at the FCC to put a stop to the destruction of freedom of speech?
Yeah, this is so important. In fact, I think, Benny, one of the first times you and I crossed paths many, many years ago was, I think, when you got in trouble for some meme you put out. I couldn't tell you which meme it was. You've gotten in trouble for so many memes over the years, but I was happy to have your back then, and we'll continue to do it. Look, we're coming out of a 3 or 4 year period where there's just been this massive censorship, both across governments, across C-suites, shutting down America's free speech rights. And there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, look, but when you censor words, you're censoring ideas. And when you censor ideas, you're preventing innovation. That's part of why I think people felt like there was this wet blanket over the country for the last 4 years, and why it feels so good in the country right now. I think so many people are fired up from all across the country to get businesses going, because they know that all of this is connected. And the Biden administration played a big role. They were pressuring Facebook. They were pressuring other social media companies to block speech, to censor Americans. And President Trump came right out of the box with an executive order that said that type of jawboning of corporations to censor people is going to end. And this is one of the top 2 priorities for me. Ending big tech's censorship cartel. That's job number 1. And thankfully, we got some good partners across government. The chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, Andrew Ferguson, he and I are very aligned on this. In fact, we may do a memorandum of understanding or other activity together soon to try to work together on these issues. But that's a big one. And then obviously, media is an important one as well. Broadcasters are differently situated than everyday Americans because they have this special privilege of having a license that not everybody gets. And therefore, they're supposed to operate not in any narrow interest, but in the public interest itself. And the FCC has completely walked away from, regulating in the public interest when it comes to these airwaves. And that's something that we're going to bring back as well. In fact, it's funny, the first time I came here to the chair's suite, I may mess up my tripod here, but the FCC's chair suite actually oversees, I don't know if you can see it, that's the NPR building right there, National Public Radio. So the FCC physically oversees NPR, and soon with me in this suite, we may be overseeing them in a very different way as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to bring this up. You made a lot of news last week. FCC Chair Brendan Carr restores bias complaints by Trump against ABC, NBC, CBS for their campaign coverage. If you wouldn't mind, because there are some major technicalities here, could you please take a step back and explain to us what kind of goodies these broadcasters get? Because it's not fair to compare them to like our show or to independent creators. They're given huge bundles of money and privilege from the American taxpayer and the American government, but there's an exchange for that, and they've broken that contract, it seems. The floor is yours, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, you're right. Broadcasters are differently situated. It's not a cable channel per se. It's not a streamer like you are. It's not a guy on the street with a soapbox. Again, they have this special right to use the public's airways. In exchange for that, they have to operate in the public interest. And in fact, when it comes to places like NPR, it's doubly so. Not only do they have to operate in the public interest, but they have this special status because they're supposed to serve the educational needs of their community. So they get benefits above and beyond even what regular broadcasters get as well. And they may be hearing from me pretty soon on those issues as well. But these particular complaints are interesting. So at the very last minute, the 11th hour, the Biden administration came out and summarily dismissed 3 different complaints that were one against ABC, one against CBS, one against NBC. The CBS one having to do with allegations of news distortion related to the 60 Minutes editing of the interview with Vice President Harris. These are not frivolous complaints. At the end of the day, it's not, entirely clear to me where we're going to land on the merits of these complaints. But what it is clear to me is summarily dismissing them at the 11th hour was a mistake. And so we had the bureaus reverse those dismissals. All 3 of those complaints are now live before the FCC. And I'm asking the bureaus to move forward with their information gathering and their process for treating these complaints the way they should be treated, which is, certainly something not frivolous. And we'll be looking at that.
Good. This is something that, of course, caused an enormous amount of high blood pressure on this program, Mr. Chairman, when we watched ABC News brag about how they had no plan to fact-check Kamala Harris during the debate. They were open about that. They were excited to tell you. And yet they fact-checked Donald Trump's jokes live. And we're thinking to ourselves, wait a second, like ABC News is running a rigged debate. This is clearly obvious, and it's not in the public interest. It's they're taking the taxpayers' goodwill, credit, privilege, and money, and then weaponizing it against the majority of the country, which seems so wrong.
Yeah, the complaint there does go to that debate. It does go to David Muir's conduct during the debate, and we're going to take a look at it. We're going to adjudicate the merits of it eventually, once we feel like we have a sufficient factual record. But the NBC complaint as well had to do with the SNL appearance that Vice President Harris and actually Senator Tim Kaine got. I mean, you may remember this. I was sitting at home. It was pretty late Saturday night before the Tuesday election on November, and all of a sudden I see sort of flash across X this breaking news: Vice President Harris's plane is landing in New York to do a last minute interview on SNL ahead of the election. And what came to my mind immediately was SNL and NBC had publicly represented that no candidate was going to get a last minute spot on SNL because they didn't think, in their view, that they could let them on consistent with FCC's rules about equal time. And so I was very surprised to see it and quickly sounded the alarm on that. And that complaint also remains live. Again, it's not just President Trump and whether he was had his rights vindicated or not. Senator Tim Kaine was running in an election there against Hung Cao. I want to make sure that Hung Cao got his rights. But there could be other candidates as well, including RFK Jr., who was still on some ballots running against Harris in at least some states. Maybe he had some rights as well. So those are all issues that we need to unpack with respect to that NBC complaint.
Yeah, many people on the right have regularly talked about how unfair it is that taxpayers have to fund media operations that cut directly against their interests. And PBS and NPR are stations that are totally and completely supported by the taxpayer and would cease operations, I believe, if the funding were pulled. And so what is the metric to actually determine whether they are of public interest, whether that's a good use of taxpayer dollars? What can the FCC do to either reset the table and ensure that there's fair coverage, or to make sure that these goodies that are given to them by us that stop being abused?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot the FCC can do. And I'm going to do it perhaps as early as this week. We'll have some more news on that to share. But the bottom line is, when NPR first came about, if you looked at, the cross section of their viewership, they seem to be making a really good effort to appeal to a broad cross section of the country and appeal to the public interest. There's been a lot of reporting recently about how if you look at their viewership, where they're going right now, it's a real sort of niche product at this point in time. That raises a lot of questions. And also remember, the reason why they have these special protections that go above and beyond ordinary broadcasters is they're supposed to serve the educational needs of communities. So, for instance, they're considered non-commercial, which means they're not allowed to run advertisements. There may be some issues there that I'll be taking a look at and we'll flag for you when you get the chance. But stepping back, years ago, there was a chairman of the FCC, Newton Minow, and he gave a famous speech at the time, and it's become famous since then as well, where he referred to broadcast TV as the vast wasteland. And it was taken as a big criticism of broadcasters at the time. In fact, broadcasters reacted so negatively that if you remember Gilligan's Island, the TV series named the boat the SS Minnow, the sunken ship, after the chairman of the FCC, Newton Minow, after that speech. From my perspective, I don't really refer to it as a vast wasteland, but instead it's a very different problem, which is this sort of great sheepdogging of the American public. This idea that broadcasters are serving the public interest, that they're appealing broadly, seems like it's been replaced increasingly over the years with just trying to push people towards preferred political narratives. And so I think, hopefully eventually the FCC is going to come together. We're going to look at this public interest standard. But to me, that's one of sort of the biggest, problems, if you're just asking me as a commentator, as to where we are in media right now, is just this sheepdogging people. I'm not sure it's been a good trend. But look, I think the movement towards podcasts is great. That's been helping a lot. The movement towards streaming services has been helping a lot. And so we're lucky in the sense we have a much bigger ecosystem when it comes to news and information than we've ever had before. I think that's why you see just massively declining audience shares. I mean, MSNBC continues to lose viewers, and people like you are continuing to gain.
Well, we appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and we appreciate your work, because without you helping protect free speech, we wouldn't have a show. We wouldn't have the ability to do this. We would be censored within an inch of our lives. And many people lost over the last 4 years so much of what they had built. And so we deeply appreciate you setting the tables correct. And I want to move on to broadband, but very quickly here, what are the maximum punishments that could be placed on an ABC, an NBC, a CBS if they are found guilty of doing this? I mean, could they get their licenses revoked? Could NPR get their funding cut or eliminated? What could the FCC do actually if they are found to be manipulating the American public like this?
Look, I think every single remedy needs to be on the table right now. When I speak about the specific remedies, people sort of overreact to that. So all I'll say is all remedies should be on the table. But with respect to NPR and PBS in particular, there is a big debate in Congress right now about Congress continuing to fund them or not. And my own view, particularly based on what I'm seeing, is that I don't see a reason why Congress should continue to fund them. And so I look forward to participating in that process and making my views to Congress known on those issues at the right time.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, there was a lot talked about. There's plenty of banging the drum about how they're going to connect in the Biden administration. Broadband, Kamala Harris doing big events and everything like that. Huge controversies with who were getting those contracts, and not having Starlink be part of that. It seems like a very underhanded movement against Elon Musk, somebody, of course, who is a big proponent of free speech and who endorsed President Trump. It seems like they were taking it out on Elon, and we have Starlink. We love using it on this program. We used it during a hurricane, for instance, here in Florida, and ran the entire show off it. Anyway, the technology seems awesome. It seems incredible. Yet, how many people were connected in rural areas to broadband or to fiber? How easily, how can we rethink the landscape given the available technology now to make sure that this actually happens?
Yeah, look, you can step back. There was this $42 billion initiative that President Biden stood up back in 2021. And actually, Vice President Harris stepped up and said that she wanted to lead that $42 billion initiative and agreed to lead it. Flash forward to the end of the administration, over 1,000 days, and you don't need an abacus or you don't even need two hands to count how many Americans were connected. The answer was zero. They didn't even turn one single shovel's worth of dirt. $42 billion. Now, the way out the door, they tried to get some of the money out there, but I think most of the money, if not all the money, is still with the government, with the Commerce Department. Some of it has probably gone to the states for planning and whatnot, but no money has actually gone into turning dirt. And they're doing things like spending potentially over $100,000, $100,000 of your taxpayer dollars per household in some cases that they're going to connect, whereas Starlink can do it for a couple $100 per household. So think about the inefficiency there. In fact, when the Commerce Department under the Biden administration was leaving, they lamented that, there's still a very big digital divide and too many Americans have been left connected. It kind of reminded me of that meme of, we're looking for the guy responsible for that 42 billion, nobody connected. They're kind of the ones that held that. So when Lutnick gets confirmed, when he gets into commerce, that 42 billion will be in his bailiwick, and they'll have to make decisions there about how much to return to the Treasury, how much to move forward, but fundamentally how to sort of reform that program.
That's exactly right. I mean, again, we used Starlink. We used it here during a Category 4 hurricane. We were able to do the show live. The entire studio was shaking, and we were connected. We had our Starlink up and out, and it was incredible technology.
Well, this is a wild story. During the first Trump administration, we had made an award about $800 million to Starlink to connect hundreds of thousands of rural Americans, and the Democrats came in and they revoked it. And in my own assessment, purely for political reasons, they said, well, this is an experimental technology. We don't know if Starlink is going to work. But meanwhile, the government itself, even the Biden administration, was using Starlink for, life and death, mission critical level operations. And so I thought that was a real shame. And what I've told everybody is they're going to get a fair shake from me at the FCC, and I'm sure from the Trump administration. People don't like that, but the fact of the matter is when the government has been weaponized to favor you and your interests, when the government turns around and gives even-handed treatment to everybody, that may feel like discrimination to you because you're used to having the government weaponized in your favor, but that's just not how we're going to operate anymore.
That's such a great point. You've been weaponizing memes. You can even reference the memes off the top of your head. Here's the meme that you referenced in case anybody needed it. This so perfectly explains the Biden administration. I know we're very, very hard up on time here, Mr. Chairman, but very quickly, we're all trying to find the guy who did this. This is Joe Biden in the hot dog outfit, right? TikTok, the TikTok ban. We're all trying to find the guy who did this, says Joe Biden, right? We're so upset about it. They did it. Your thoughts on this ban? It's obviously very controversial. There's very strong opinions on both sides. Your thoughts on the TikTok ban and how should it proceed?
Yeah, this one's pretty simple in my view. At this point, President Trump is going to lead on this. President Trump is going to call the ball. He's, made clear that he's the one that can put together a deal that's both going to, safeguard U.S. national security interests and hopefully make sure that the people that, innocently are using TikTok get to continue to do so. So I'm, looking forward to him now that he's been in there for a week, working with his national security team. There's always been various rumors of different deals, everything from Mr. Wonderful all the way on down. And I'm excited about the opportunity to see, the deal that President Trump can put together. I look forward to supporting where he lands that. Good.
So as long as it's in American hands, which is something that we care a lot about, then TikTok should be good.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Parting message. I think it might be refreshing to reset the table. Perhaps a parting message to Elon Musk. I know he engages quite a bit with what we're doing. I'm sure it's going to be refreshing to hear that everything will not be politically weaponized against him. What's your message to the owner of X?
Look, I mean, our agenda is pretty clear. We're going to sort of look at the big tech censorship, rein that in. We're going to take a look at media regulations in the public interest. And then 3, I've got a whole economic agenda that includes space. So the FCC has a space bureau that it stood up. And unfortunately, over the last couple of years, it operated more like flypaper than rocket fuel in the process. We're going to fundamentally transform that. So whether it's SpaceX or hopefully Kuiper soon, or even the small startups, I do think the FCC is going to play a role in making sure that we can get the thousands and thousands of satellites up there and the launch authorizations that are needed so the U.S. can continue to lead the world in space. And I think the FCC is going to play a small but important role in that. And that's going to be one of the lasting legacies I think we're going to achieve over the next couple of years.
That's so awesome, and nobody talks about it. It's so important. It's so unbelievably important. That's the next battle. The battle in 2024, I think, like the downward effect of Elon Musk buying X and setting the tone for what free speech actually looks like. Now you're seeing the results in Meta. You're seeing the results at Google. You're seeing the results in Microsoft and Amazon. I mean, it truly is unbelievable. I think it's the bravest. We think it's the bravest singular move that's been made in free speech history, and so it's got to be an exciting time to take over. Mr.
It
Chairman.
is. Look, I think there's a saying that I think was attributed to Thomas Jefferson, but I don't think he said it. But when we attribute something to someone like him, maybe people pay more attention to it. But there's a line about one man with courage makes a majority, and when you see what Musk did with X and Linda did on X in terms of putting their foot in the ground and standing up for free speech when it wasn't popular at all. And to your point, now there's a majority. Facebook has gone that way, and others are sort of heading that direction as well. I think that's a great thing for the country.
What an exciting time to be taking over, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for your work here, and it's so exciting to see you in the chair, Mr. Carr.
Yeah,
joining us live. Everybody follow along. 150,000 on X. You can also find great memes and replies and some of the spiciest content and saltiest content that exists on the platform. Mr. Chairman, we're very, very excited to have you on the program. Godspeed. We're supporting your work.
Thanks. Great to be with you. Thanks so much.